Episode 1: The Space Between Strangers. Section 1: Prologue. A City That Knows. There is a particular hour in New York City that belongs to no one, and that is the hour in which everything true about the city becomes briefly, dangerously visible. It is 5:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in late September, and the light is doing what September light does in the city on its best and most honest days. It is arriving gray gold through the corridors between buildings, the color of something that is ending and something that is beginning simultaneously, a light that has no direct name in any language, but that every person who has ever loved the city recognizes in the chest before the eyes have time to process it. It is the light of ambiguity. It is the light of transition. It is the light that the city wears when it is not performing for anyone. New York City at 5:47 in the morning in late September is a city that remembers. The streets hold memory the way old stone holds warmth, slowly, invisibly, and long after the source of the heat has moved on. The sidewalk on West Charles Street remembers every footstep that has ever moved across it, every conversation that drifted down to pavement level from the open windows above, every farewell performed under the particular cruelty of a streetlight at 3 in the morning when words run out. The intersection of 5th Avenue and 42nd Street has witnessed 10,000 meetings that changed the direction of 10,000 lives, and it does not distinguish between them, does not rank them by significance or outcome. It holds them all with the same indifferent tenderness. A city of 8.5 million people generates, at any given moment, an incomprehensible density of private experience, grief and joy and boredom and longing, all occurring simultaneously in apartments stacked 40 stories high, in subway cars passing each other in the dark beneath Lexington Avenue, in the narrow spaces between bodies on crowded platforms where strangers stand close enough to feel each other's warmth without ever learning each other's names. This is a city that knows what is coming before the people inside it do. This is not a simple love story. It is best to know that from the beginning, because simple love stories are comfortable things. They arrive with their endings already tucked inside their beginnings. Their obstacles are easy to name. Their resolutions are warm and satisfying in the way certain meals are satisfying, filling, familiar, and unlikely to change you. This story is more complicated than that. It is about two people who were living their lives correctly. They had followed the right maps. They had arrived, more or less, where those maps had promised they would arrive. Then the map stopped being enough. Not because it was wrong, exactly, but because both of them had become the kind of people who needed more from the territory than any map could provide. Fateful encounters are never announced as such. This is, perhaps, the most important thing to understand about them. They do not arrive with music. They do not arrive with premonition, with elevated atmosphere, with the sense that something is about to change. They arrive in ordinary packaging, a Tuesday morning, a conference room, a gallery opening on a drizzling September night. They are disguised as coincidence, wrapped in the unremarkable, delivered in the most mundane containers the world can find. And this is not accidental. The city knows that if it announced them, if it sent the music ahead, if it arranged the light too dramatically, if it let either party know what the morning contained, one of them would turn around. Both of them, probably. Because both of these people have very good reasons to keep their lives exactly as they are. The city knows this too. It knows Elena Vasquez, who is already awake in her apartment on Charles Street, lying in the dark with her eyes open in the 30 seconds before her alarm sounds, performing the daily ritual of returning to herself from wherever sleep has taken her. It knows Daniel Holt, who is asleep on the 74th floor of a building on the Upper East Side with the particular quality of sleep that is actually a refusal to be awake, deep and efficient and dreamless, or, if there are dreams, he does not bring them back with him when he surfaces. The city holds both of them this morning the way it holds all its people, without preference, without judgment, without any indication of what it is about to do. In 4 hours and 13 minutes, Elena Vasquez and Daniel Holt will be in the same room for the first time. The city has been arranging this for weeks, in the unhurried way it arranges everything, through the ordinary traffic of professional life. Through the coincidence of a development project and a firm's client list and a conference room booking on the 38th floor of a building on 6th Avenue. The city did not force it. It simply placed the pieces where they needed to be and allowed the morning to proceed. It is a Tuesday neither of them will ever entirely recover from. Not in the way that suggests damage, though there will be a kind of damage eventually, the kind that comes from being opened when you had decided to remain closed. But certain mornings mark you permanently. They carve a clean line through the calendar of your life so that everything afterward is organized in relation to it. Before this Tuesday. After. The city exhales. The gray gold light moves a degree further east. A taxi makes the turn from Hudson Street onto Charles, its headlights briefly illuminating a row of brownstones that have stood since 1887 and will stand long after everyone in this story has become someone else's memory. A pigeon finds a thermal above 6th Avenue and circles twice without effort, seeing the whole grid below it the way no one inside it ever can. The alarm on Elena's phone sounds at 5:55. This is where the story begins. Section 2, Elena's World. The Architecture of Alone. She is already awake when the alarm sounds. She reaches across the nightstand and silences it in a single practiced motion, no fumbling, no groaning, no negotiation with the morning. Elena Vasquez has not been caught off guard by her own alarm in 3 years, because Elena Vasquez does not do anything that can be prepared for without preparation and consciousness, it turns out, can be prepared for. She surfaces from sleep at approximately 5:53 every morning, lies in the dark for the remaining minutes with the particular stillness of a person taking inventory, and by the time the alarm sounds, she has already decided to get up. The alarm is not a summons. It is confirmation. The apartment is hers in a way that is almost architectural in its intention. Because it is architectural in its intention, she designed it herself in the months after the divorce, when she needed something to do with the precision that marriage had taught her to suppress. It is a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a pre-war building on West Charles Street in the West Village, and from the outside it looks like every other apartment on that block, the sandstone facade slightly darkened by a century of city air. The windows framed in original wood casings that have been painted over so many times they have developed their own topography. But inside, she has made something that is unmistakably hers. Clean lines and warm wood, and a considered silence in the arrangement of objects that speaks the language of someone who knows that a room is not merely a container, but a declaration. The walls are white, not stark white, not the default white of landlord paint, but a warm white with the faintest undertone of cream that she chose from 17 sample swatches over the course of a weekend she spent sitting cross-legged on the floor of what would become her living room, holding each sample up to the light at different hours of the day until she found the one that the morning light turned to something close to gold and that the evening light turned to something close to bone. The floors are original wide plank oak that she stripped and refinished herself over 2 weekends with a rental sander and the stubborn patience she brings to everything she decides to do. The woodwork gleams now in a way it has not gleamed in decades, and she feels something approaching pride every time the morning light catches it and makes the grain visible in its full complexity. The drafting table sits in the window that faces the back of the building, a north-facing window, the architect's window, the window that gives the most honest light because it has no direct sun to flatter or distort. Only the steady ambient illumination that shows things as they are. The table is walnut, tilted to its working angle, and on it tonight there is a roll of trace paper and 3 mechanical pencils, and a half-finished sketch of the Harborside Cultural Center's east facade. The pencil lines light and questioning in the way that early sketches always are, full of possibility and uncommitted to anything yet. Around the table, the architecture books are arranged on open shelves, not by color, as some people arrange books, not by size, not alphabetically, but by a logic that is entirely personal and that she could explain, if asked, but only at length. Renzo piano next to Tadao Ando because they are in conversation about light. Kenneth Frampton's history of modern architecture at eye level because she returns to it often enough that reaching is a small imposition. Her grandmother's recipe notebook, spiral-bound and stained, placed on the lowest shelf between 2 volumes of regional Baroque architecture because her grandmother was a kind of architecture too, a structure that organized everything around her, that gave shape and shelter to everyone who lived inside her warmth. She makes coffee in a small stovetop espresso maker, a mocha pot, aluminum, bought at a bodega in Jackson Heights the week she moved out and brought here as the first object to cross the threshold of her new life. The coffee is Cuban style, strong and dark, and she makes it the way her grandmother taught her, water just below the valve line, the grounds packed firmly, but not so firmly they resist the pressure. The heat kept low after the first bubble, so the extraction is slow and honest. She drinks it standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the narrow alley behind the building where a single ailanthus tree has grown up through the gap between 2 fences, improbable and uncurated and somehow more beautiful for both of those qualities. This is the part of the day she is most herself. Before the professional armor is assembled. Before she becomes the version of Elena Vasquez that Meridian Architecture Group sees, that clients see, that the world in general is permitted to see. There is another version of her in this kitchen at 6:05 in the morning, still in the oversized university sweatshirt she sleeps in, her dark hair loose, her feet bare on the warm wood floors. And this version is softer and more uncertain and not performing anything for anyone, and she guards this version with a care that borders on ferocity because she learned, in the most personal possible way, that the people you allow inside the unguarded version of yourself are also the people with the power to do the most damage. Her marriage to Marco Reyes lasted 4 years and ended 3 years ago. Elena does not dwell on it now. She has made the specific decision not to dwell on it, and that decision is one of the foundational choices of the life she has built since. But the last morning is still there, the way certain mornings stay, not exactly as a wound, more like a watermark, visible only when the light hits at a particular angle. He was standing at the kitchen window of their apartment in Astoria, a larger apartment, a shared apartment, full of the negotiated compromises of shared space, and she came in, and he did not turn around. That was it. That was the whole of the last morning, in a certain sense. A man standing at a window and not turning around. It was not dramatic. There was no scene, no final cutting word, no slammed door. There was only the silence that said what 4 years of quieter silences had been building toward. I have been here and you have not seen me, and we have both grown so accustomed to this absence of seeing that we have called it a marriage. The papers were clean. Elena made sure of that. She approached the divorce with the same methodical precision she brings to structural engineering problems, identifying each variable, addressing each element in sequence, leaving no ambiguity in the language of separation. She moved out first. She found Charles Street within a week. She was at her drafting table, in this apartment, designing the renovation, within a month. Her friends called this efficiency. Her therapist, whom she saw for 14 months and then decided she was done, called it productive displacement. Elena called it survival and thought that was probably the most honest name for it. Solitude is something she chose then and has continued to choose in the years since, and she has chosen it with the same deliberateness with which she chooses everything. Not because she is incapable of intimacy, but because she has become extremely careful about the cost of it. She is 32 years old, and she knows exactly who she is, and she has arranged her life to reflect that knowledge, and she finds, most mornings, that this is enough. More than enough. She has her work, which she loves with a devotion that is not dramatic, but is total, the way some people love particular landscapes, not because of what they provide, but because of what they are. She has a small, close circle of friends who know her well enough not to perform for her and to expect the same consideration in return. She has this apartment, this coffee, this north-facing window, this ailanthus tree growing through the gap between fences in the alley below. She has built a life that fits her exactly. She knows this is something many people never manage. She is appropriately grateful for it. By 7:10, she is dressed and assembled, a charcoal blazer over a dark blouse, tailored trousers, low-heeled boots that make sense for both a presentation and a walking commute. Her hair is up in the kind of arrangement that looks effortless because she has practiced it until it is. She picks up her bag, leather, well-made, capacious enough for her laptop and her rolled presentation drawings and the small notebook and the 2 backup USB drives she brings to every presentation. Because she learned years ago that technical failure is the one variable that can be addressed entirely by preparation. She locks the apartment behind her and takes the stairs, and on the ground floor landing she pauses, as she always does, to look at the building's original terrazzo floor. A faded geometric pattern in cream and rust and forest green that whoever laid it in 1911 thought through with real care, a pattern that has been walked on for over a century. Still rewards looking. Charles Street at 7:15 in the morning in late September is extraordinary in the way that certain blocks in the West Village are extraordinary, narrow, tree-lined, the brownstones close on both sides. The light arriving in long diagonal shafts between the buildings so that the street moves between shadow and gold with every few steps. She walks east toward the subway, and the city opens around her incrementally, the streets widening as she moves from the residential quiet of Charles toward the commercial noise of 7th Avenue, and then the broader arteries beyond. She notices what she always notices, the pre-war corbelling on the building at the corner of Charles and West 4th, how it catches the morning light and turns the limestone from gray to amber. The way the wrought iron balustrade on a federal-style townhouse on West 11th has been repaired at some point in the last decade, with a section of slightly different iron, the joint barely visible but legible to anyone who is paying attention. The construction scaffolding around a building on Christopher Street where someone is, based on the materials she can see stacked at the base, attempting to restore original glazed brick that had been stuccoed over sometime in the 1970s, a mistake being patiently undone. She reads the city the way some people read music, not just hearing it but understanding its structure, its intentions, the decisions being made in every line and junction and material choice. She finds the language of buildings more trustworthy than most other languages. Buildings cannot lie about what they are, not indefinitely. Time always reveals the quality of the construction beneath the finish. She takes the A train from West 4th Street, and she is at Meridian Architecture Group's offices on 46th and 6th by 8:05, which is as she intended. Because today is the most important presentation of her career, and she has not left a single variable to chance. The offices are on the 16th floor, all glass and exposed concrete in the way that architecture firms like to signal their seriousness to the world, and she is the first one in, as she always is. She makes herself a second coffee in the firm's kitchen, inferior to her own, no mocha pot, just a pour-over, but adequate, and she carries it to her desk, and she opens her laptop, and she goes through the presentation one final time. The Harborside Cultural Center. A waterfront development in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, a multi-use cultural facility on a formerly industrial site at the edge of the East River, intended to house performance spaces, gallery facilities, community studios, and a public waterfront esplanade. The project had been in development for 18 months. The proposal she is presenting today is the culmination of that work. Every structural calculation, every material choice, every decision about how the building meets the water and the water meets the building and the building meets the sky. It is the most ambitious thing she has attempted professionally, and she wants it in the specific, whole way that she wants things, not for the recognition it would bring her, not for the career milestone, not for any of the externally legible rewards that motivate other people. She wants to build this building. She wants it to exist. She wants to be walking along that waterfront in 15 years and see the way the late afternoon light falls across the facade she has designed and know that she put it there. At 9:45, her colleague Marcus Webb comes in tall, 50-ish, silver-haired, the kind of assured professional ease that comes from 30 years of surviving and thriving in a competitive industry. And he finds her exactly where he expected to find her, and he says what he expected to say, that she is ready, that the work is extraordinary, that today will go the way it should go. She receives this without warmth and without dismissiveness, the way she receives most encouragement, as data to be noted and then set aside. She does not need to be told she is ready. She is ready. She knows she is ready. What she needs at this particular moment is to stay inside the work and not drift toward the periphery of the morning, toward the things she cannot control. She cannot know, of course, that one of the things she cannot control is already walking south through Central Park in the early October light, 22 minutes from his office and 45 minutes from her conference room. Section 3, Daniel's World. The perfect cage. Daniel Holt wakes at 6:30 the way he does everything, cleanly, without friction, without the residue of wherever he has been. He surfaces, orients, reaches for his phone. He reads 3 emails before his feet touch the floor, 2 from associates at the firm regarding a deal that closed overnight. 1 from his mother regarding a dinner that he has already agreed to attend and that she is nonetheless confirming with the thoroughness of a military operation. He fires brief, precise replies, sets the phone face down on the nightstand, and goes to make coffee. The apartment is on the 31st floor of a building on East 74th Street, and the view from the kitchen window is Central Park going amber and gold in the September morning, the canopy beginning its long seasonal turn. The reservoir catching the early light in a way that makes it look, for approximately 20 minutes every morning at this time of year, like hammered silver. It is an extraordinary view. He has lived with it for 4 years, and he sees it every morning, and he does not take it for granted exactly, but he has reached the complicated relation to beauty that sustained proximity creates. The view no longer arrests him. It is instead a background condition of his mornings, ambient and reliable and somehow, in its reliability, a little sad. The apartment signals arrival the way that certain spaces do, not aggressively, not with the insecurity of new money, but with the settled confidence of someone who was born inside a particular aesthetic register and has simply continued to inhabit it. The Basquiat above the fireplace in the living room, not large, not the artist's most recognizable work, but genuinely his, was purchased at auction 6 years ago on the advice of a friend whose taste he trusted. And he loves it in the way that people sometimes love art that they chose for reasons they cannot entirely articulate, not because it is beautiful, though it is, but because it has always told him something he cannot quite hear clearly. The kitchen is all pale marble and matte brass, and the kind of considered understatement that costs more to achieve than its opposite. The coffee machine, a single-cup brewer imported from Switzerland, makes, it must be said, the best cup of coffee available outside of a serious espresso bar in Naples, and this is not a small thing. Because Daniel Holt cares about coffee in the specific way that serious people care about the small, controllable pleasures when the larger ones become difficult to locate. Charlotte is still asleep. She is in the bedroom, which is at the far end of the apartment, a distance that is not calculated but that has, over 4 years, become a kind of geography, the two halves of the apartment representing, without either of them having decided this. The two halves of a shared life that has a great deal of warmth in it and very little depth. This is not anyone's fault. This is simply the shape of what has grown between two people who were compatible in every measurable way and who mistook compatibility for necessity. He stands at the kitchen window for longer than he needs to. The coffee is ready. He is not drinking it. He watches the park the way he watches the park most mornings, not with conscious thought, not with the directed attention of someone solving a problem, but with the wide, slightly melancholy focus of someone who is very good at his work and who works all the time and who has, in the intervals between work, no clear idea what he is for. This is not depression. Daniel Holt is not unhappy in any clinical or even easily explainable sense. He has a life most people would regard as enviable in almost every particular. He is good at what he does. He is respected. He has people who love him, his mother, his partners at the firm, Charlotte, in her steady and genuine way. He has the park and the Basquiat and the coffee and the view. He has a body that works, a mind that is quick, and the material security that allows him not to think about material security, which is one of the great invisible luxuries of the world. What he has is everything. And in everything, somewhere, tucked in the space between all the correct components, there is a persistent and nameless absence that he has learned to work around the way a city works around a building that cannot be demolished. By building everything else right up to its edges, by making it functional in the landscape even if its original purpose has been lost, by never quite looking directly at it. He is a man of extraordinary precision in his professional life. He reads contracts the way other people read people, with the attention to what is not said as much as what is, with an eye for the fault lines in language, the places where ambiguity has been built in deliberately or has crept in through carelessness, and with the patience to understand the difference. He has made his firm, and made himself, by this gift for reading what lies beneath the language of things. He has simply, over the years, extended a professional courtesy to his own interior life. He does not read it. He looks away from it with the practiced ease of a man who knows exactly where the looking leads and has decided that the destination is not worth the journey. He showers, dresses. Dark suit, white shirt, a tie that Charlotte gave him for his birthday, silk, a deep charcoal with a narrow stripe. Because she has good taste, and because he liked it when she gave it to him, and because he has put it on today without thinking about it, and for no reason he would be able to name. He ties it in front of the mirror in the bathroom and looks at himself for approximately 4 seconds, the duration of a person confirming they are presentable, and then looks away. Charlotte appears in the doorway, still in the cream cashmere robe she bought in London last winter, holding a mug of tea, warm and slightly sleepy in the way she is most genuinely herself. She says something about his tie, something easy and kind, and he smiles back at her, and the smile is real. This matters. He loves Charlotte. He does not love her the way she deserves to be loved, and somewhere, in the deepest and most honest part of herself, Charlotte may know this too, though she has not yet let the knowledge become a sentence. He loves her with the genuine, functional affection of a person who has spent 4 years with someone kind and intelligent and reliably present, who knows the shape of her days and the sound of her laugh, who would be genuinely diminished by her absence. What he does not do, what he cannot seem to do, regardless of effort or intention or the warmth of his feeling for her, is see her. Not truly. Not with the full, unguarded attention of a person encountering someone real. He has stopped seeing her, and the terrible, ordinary sadness of it is that she cannot quite tell, and he would not know how to say it even if he wanted to. He leaves at 7 o'clock. He walks to work, always 22 minutes from the building on 74th to Hargrove, and holds offices on Park Avenue and 48th, and these 22 minutes are the most purely his own of any portion of his day. He belongs to no one during this walk. He is not a senior partner, not a son, not a boyfriend, not a client's trusted advisor. He is a man walking through the park, and then the streets of the Upper East Side, and then Midtown, and the city opens around him with the particular morning generosity it extends to pedestrians who pay attention. He walks south through the park, past the reservoir, past the running paths where the city's early risers are already taking their laps, past the Bethesda fountain where two pigeons are doing something ceremonial on the rim of the basin. He exits the park at 61st Street and continues south through the 60s, the neighborhood shifting from residential grandeur to the mixed-use territory of the 50s, and then to Midtown proper, the buildings taller and less personal. The streets filling with the density of people who are also walking toward something. He passes the Seagram building. He stops, as he occasionally does, to look at it, the bronze and glass, Mies van der Rohe's austere perfection, the way the building occupies its plaza with such complete assurance that the city seems to have arranged itself around it rather than the other way around. He does not know why he stops at this building specifically. He is not an architect. But there is something in the way it refuses ornamentation, the way it says exactly what it is and nothing more, that he finds, on the mornings when he is paying attention, genuinely moving. He arrives at the firm at 7:15. His assistant has been there since 7, Madison, efficient and unfailingly prepared, who has left a coffee on his desk and his schedule printed in the clean 12-point font he prefers, the day organized and color-coded and bereft of ambiguity. The morning is full, 2 calls before 9, a client letter to review and sign, then at 10 o'clock a trip across Midtown to 1221 Avenue of the Americas for the Landco Capital Development Project presentation. The Harborside Cultural Center in Williamsburg. Landco is evaluating architectural proposals, and Daniel's firm is handling all of the transaction's legal infrastructure, the development agreements, the public-private partnership frameworks, the financing structures, the liability allocation. He is attending the presentation to assess the proposals from a legal and risk standpoint. He does not know the name of the lead architect on the proposal he will be evaluating. He has not needed to know this. He has needed to know the structural terms of the development agreement and the contours of the liability exposure, and these he knows with the precision that 3 months of work has given him. He settles behind his desk and opens the Landco file. For a moment, before the morning takes him, there is only the way he reads with his whole body, the way his right hand moves to his pen without thinking when he reaches something worth marking, the quality of his concentration, which is absolute in a way that is both his greatest professional gift and a sign of the problem at the center of his life. He can focus on anything except himself. Across Midtown and 11 floors below, Elena is reviewing the same project in the same hour. They do not know each other's names. The city knows this, and the city is patient. It has arranged the morning with care. It can wait 45 more minutes. Floor of 1221 Avenue of the Americas has floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides, and the city through the glass at 10 in the morning in late September is the city in its full declarative mode. The towers of Midtown arranged in the middle distance with the absolute confidence of things that know exactly what they are, the sky behind them a particular deep blue that only arrives after the first cool nights of autumn have cleared the summer haze. It is a room designed to make its occupants feel the weight and importance of what they are doing, and it succeeds at this, most of the time, in the way that expensive conference rooms always do, by placing the people inside them against a backdrop that dwarfs them slightly without dwarfing them entirely. Elena arrives at 9:48. She is with Marcus, who is talking as they come off the elevator. Something about the Landco team, who has final approval authority, how the legal advisors tend to dominate these meetings if they are allowed to, how she should speak directly to the principals when possible. She is listening, and she is also setting up, connecting her laptop to the room's presentation system, positioning her physical presentation boards against the credenza, uncapping a fresh marker for the whiteboard in case she needs it. She moves through these tasks with the efficiency of someone for whom preparation is not anxiety management, but craft. She is not rushing, not performing calm, simply doing each thing in the correct order with the appropriate care. The room fills in the next 10 minutes. The Landco Capital contingent, project principals, financial advisors, a public affairs director, 2 representatives from the Williamsburg Community Board. They're in an advisory capacity. Marcus's 2 junior associates from Meridian, carrying additional boards and a scale model in a protective case. An administrative coordinator from Landco who is managing the room. Conversation in the low, professional register of people who know each other from previous meetings or do not know each other at all. Introductions, the weather, the commute, the obligatory observations about the view. Daniel arrives at 10:03 with 2 associates from his firm. He apologizes for the delay in the way that people who are never truly delayed apologize briefly, without explanation, with the quiet confidence that 3 minutes late in a room full of people who need what you provide is not, functionally, late at all. He is introduced to the room in the general way of late arrivals. People nod, people return to their conversations. He takes a seat at the long conference table and opens his laptop and pulls his legal pad to the position on the table that he always favors, to his left, pen at the ready, and he checks something on his phone, and he does not look up. Elena, at the front of the room, is making a final adjustment to her presentation slide, a small thing, a margin she noticed this morning that bothers her. She looks up from the laptop screen to see if everyone has settled, taking the presenter's unconscious inventory of her audience. Her eyes move across the assembled faces in the practiced sweep of a woman who has presented to rooms full of important people enough times that faces register without particularly landing. Then her eyes reach the end of the table, and he looks up from his phone at the same instant. The moment is not electricity. It is not the thunderclap of romantic fiction, not fireworks, not quickened breath, not any of the loud signals by which attraction usually announces itself in stories. It is something quieter than that, and more dangerous because of the quiet. Loud things can be named, addressed, dismissed. What passes between Elena Vasquez and Daniel Holt in the instant before they both look away is closer to recognition. The disorienting recognition of seeing a word in a language you did not know you spoke. Oh, this. I did not know this was a thing that existed. I did not know I was looking for it. And now that I have seen it, I cannot unsee it, which is going to be a very significant problem. The moment lasts perhaps 2 seconds. Elena buries it immediately, with the reflexive efficiency of a woman who has spent 3 years building a very specific interior architecture and who knows a structural threat when she encounters one. She looks back at her laptop. She straightens. She says, in the voice that is her presentation voice, clear, measured, authoritative in the way that comes from knowing your material rather than performing expertise, that she would like to begin. She presents for 40 minutes. There is no need to inventory each slide, each technical argument, each structural diagram, because that is not what the 40 minutes are really about. They are about Elena in the fullness of her professional self, which is a considerable thing to witness. She is not performing. She is not selling. She is explaining the building to the room the way a person explains something they understand from the inside out, with the specificity of total fluency. She talks about the site, the history of the industrial waterfront, the way the existing concrete pier structures have been incorporated into the foundation design rather than demolished, the way the building approaches the river not as a terminus, but as a conversation. She talks about the materiality, the weathered steel cladding that will silver and oxidize over time, the way the river light will move across the facade at different hours, the interior light courts that will carry daylight to the lower levels without compromising the privacy of the performance spaces. She talks about the public esplanade not as a feature of the building, but as an extension of it, the idea that the building's purpose does not end at its walls. Daniel watches her. He watches her not as a man watching a woman, not with the lazy attention of attraction, but with the particular focus he brings to things he finds genuinely true. He has spent his professional life reading beneath the language of things, and what he reads beneath the language of this presentation, beneath the technical fluency, beneath the professional composure, is something he has no legal framework for. A person who loves what she is doing in a way that has made her extraordinary at it, and who would do it exactly this way even if no one were watching. He finds this almost unbearably interesting. He has been in this room for 10 minutes, and he has already thought about her more than he has thought about Charlotte in the last 2 weeks, and the observation arrives in him not as guilt, but as information, which may be more troubling than guilt would be. The Q&A begins. 3 of his questions, and he asks 3, over the course of the session, are noted by others in the room for their sharpness. They are the kind of questions that are also tests. The first is about structural contingency in the foundation design, specifically the load-bearing implications of the retained pier structures during extreme tidal events. The second is about the public-private funding mechanisms and how the design accommodates potential phased construction if early financing tranches underperform. The third is about the relationship between the Esplanade's legal designation as public space and the building's internal programming, a jurisdictional question that has liability implications he is already beginning to map. Each question is pointed, penetrating, the kind of question that establishes the asker's seriousness and creates, in the answerer, a fork in the road. Either you know your material well enough to answer fully, or the question reveals the edge of your expertise. She answers all 3. Completely, without hesitation, without the defensive register that some presenters adopt when they feel interrogated. She addresses the structural contingency question with 3 specific engineering references, then adds a 4th consideration he had not raised that is actually more consequential than the one he did raise. He recognizes this, registers it, and says nothing, though something behind his eyes shifts in the way things shift behind the eyes of people who are not accustomed to being answered better than they asked. The phased construction question she handles by referring directly to a table in the materials he has been provided. He finds the page. She has already anticipated exactly this contingency. The documentation is complete, and she says, briefly and without drama, that she does not design buildings that only work in ideal conditions. And the jurisdictional question she takes apart with a kind of precision that makes the room briefly aware of the irony of a lawyer being outstructured by an architect on a legal question. She has already consulted with municipal attorneys on exactly this designation. She knows the case law, she knows the precedents, and she can provide him with the relevant documentation before the end of the business day, if that would be useful. He says that would be very useful. He says this in a voice that reveals nothing except that he means it. The meeting concludes at 11:35. People collect their materials, business cards are exchanged, and the room begins to break apart with the particular efficiency of professional gatherings returning their participants to the city's larger flow. Marcus shakes hands with the Lanco principals. Elena packs her laptop. Daniel closes his legal pad. In the closing minutes, the distance between them has its own quiet tension, the way they move in parallel, near but not near, the way neither of them manufactures a reason to be in the same corner of the room, the way both are precisely, painfully aware of the other's location without appearing to be. He leaves with his associates. She leaves with Marcus. The elevator doors close on each of them, 30 seconds apart. The city receives them back into its flow, moves on, and tells neither of them what it has already arranged for the evening. Section 5. The city between them. Near misses. New York City has a genius for near misses. For the almost encounter, the proximate crossing, the near collision of two trajectories that arrives at the edge of contact and then veers away at the last possible instant, leaving both parties intact and unaware of how close they came. The city does this with the casual mastery of something that has had a great deal of practice, which it has. A century of dense vertical living and subway grids, and the particular randomness of a population of millions arranged on a narrow island has given New York a kind of statistical expertise in proximity without contact that no other city on earth can quite match. At 11:48 in the morning, Elena and Daniel take the same elevator bank down from the 38th floor of 1221 Avenue of the Americas. They do not take the same elevator. She is in the third car from the left, which arrives first, because Marcus pressed the call button an instant before Elena finished her conversation with one of the Lanco principals. Daniel's group arrives at the elevator bank 40 seconds later and takes the fourth car, because his associate is pressing the down button and gesturing the group in. The doors of Elena's elevator close with the mild hydraulic finality of things that do not know what they are doing, and she descends 38 floors to the lobby and steps out onto 6th Avenue into the September midday light. He emerges from the same lobby doors 50 seconds later. She is already half a block north. He turns south. They are moving away from each other, and neither of them knows this. At 12:17, Elena is walking west on 42nd Street toward a lunch meeting with a contractor in the garment district. Daniel is walking east on 42nd Street toward a client lunch near Grand Central. The midday crowd on 42nd is, at this hour, its most impenetrable. The lunch rush from Midtown's office towers converging on the same sidewalks, the same crosswalks, the same stretches of pavement that are everyone's path and no one's in particular. The two of them are moving toward each other on the same block. At the crosswalk at 42nd and 7th Avenue, Elena stops at the red light on the south side of the street. Daniel, approaching from the east on the north side, slows as the light changes and holds with the crowd at the north curb. They are standing at opposite ends of a single crosswalk, separated by 50 feet and the width of 7th Avenue, and the light changes before either of them crosses, a timing anomaly. A traffic signal held longer than standard because a cross-street bus has triggered a priority override, and the light turns red again, and the moment closes and opens into a different configuration of people and signals, and neither of them has seen the other. And the city files the miss in whatever archive it keeps of such things and continues. Elena eats lunch with the contractor in a diner on 35th Street, booth in the back, the specific cheerful noise of midday service around them. A conversation about structural steel procurement timelines that is genuinely engaging to her in the way that concrete logistical problems are genuinely engaging. She orders the same thing she always orders when she is in this neighborhood: black bean soup, a side of plantains, strong coffee. She does not think about the conference room. She is careful not to think about the conference room. Daniel eats lunch at a private dining room near Grand Central with 3 Lanco principals, the elevated, hushed atmosphere of a serious business meal, wine that no one is quite drinking fast enough. Conversation about the project, and then about other projects, and then about the market, and then about the market's relation to the current regulatory environment. He is sharp and engaged and says the things that are useful to say, and somewhere in the margin of his attention, not the center, he is too disciplined for that, but the margin, the presentation is still running. Not the content of it exactly. The quality of the person who gave it. At 1:45, Elena is back at Meridian. She passes within a block of his office on Park Avenue without knowing it. At 2:30, Daniel walks across Midtown for an afternoon meeting and passes within 2 blocks of Meridian without knowing it. They are in the same approximate territory for much of the afternoon, the common geography of Midtown Manhattan, which is not as large as it seems and considerably smaller than the lives it contains. And the city watches this with the unhurried patience of something that knows it has the evening arranged. By 4 o'clock, each of them is back in their separate offices, back inside the particular gravity field of their respective days, and each of them, separately, at different desks, with different ambient sounds filling the space around them, carries a quality of slight off-centeredness that they would be hard-pressed to account for if asked. Not distraction, exactly. More like the sensation of having heard the beginning of a piece of music and been removed from the room before the melody resolved. The incompleteness of a thing that does not yet know it is incomplete. Neither of them knows that they will see each other again in 3 hours. The city has known this all day. In a converted industrial building whose ground floor has been colonized by the art world with the casual confidence of a community that knows it belongs wherever it decides it belongs. New urban futures, American architecture at the edge of the possible. That is the exhibition's title, and it has been mounted with the care and intelligence that the best architectural exhibitions bring to the challenge of making buildings comprehensible in a gallery setting, which is always a partial translation at best. Buildings are four-dimensional objects in time and space and weather and use, and no model or photograph or drawing fully contains them. But the attempt is honorable and the work on display is serious, and by 7 o'clock the gallery has filled with the particular population of a New York architectural opening, architects and their clients, design journalists, foundation people, academics, city officials who want to be seen paying attention to design culture, and the interested public, which is always larger than expected in this city, always ready to show up for a thing that matters. Elena is there because Marcus told her she needed to be there, and she is there because Marcus is right and she knows it. And she is there in the specific mode of a person fulfilling a professional obligation that she does not personally enjoy while being committed to doing it correctly. She wears a deep burgundy dress, fitted, the color of dried roses, the neckline simple and the silhouette clean. Because she has learned that certain events require a visible effort at presentation, and she is willing to make that effort even when she finds the necessity of it slightly exhausting. She wears it without drama. She always wears things without drama, as though the relationship between herself and her clothes is functional rather than performative. As though she chose this dress because it is the most appropriate tool for this particular task, and not because it is also beautiful, though it is, in the restrained, serious way that things Elena Vasquez chooses tend to be beautiful. She moves through the gallery with a glass of sparkling water, not wine. She does not drink at professional events, a rule she made early in her career and has kept without exception, and she does the thing she has come to do. She speaks with the curator, a tall woman in her 50s who has been championing the inclusion of her work in this exhibition for the better part of a year. She speaks with two colleagues from other firms, one of whom she genuinely likes and one of whom she endures with professional warmth. She speaks briefly with a journalist from an architecture publication who wants to do a profile, and she is appropriately available without being too available. And she deflects the profile request with the kind of grace that could easily be mistaken for modesty, but is actually something more complicated. She does not want to be a subject. She wants to be a builder. There is a difference. Her work in the exhibition consists of 2 pieces, a large-format architectural drawing of the South Bronx Community Center she designed 3 years ago, rendered in graphite and ink on 24 by 36 paper. The drawing itself an object of considerable beauty, the precision of the line work, the way the building's proportions resolve in the drawing's geometry. And a scale model, the same building in white chipboard and acrylic, mounted on a plinth in the center of the gallery's main room. 1:100 scale. Every detail present. She designed this building for a community organization that ran out of funding before the project could break ground, and it has never been built, and the drawing and the model are all that exist of it. And she has always thought of this as the specific grief of architecture, that the most necessary buildings are often the ones that do not get made. She is talking with Marcus near the gallery's far wall when she first sees him. He is standing in front of the scale model. Alone, Charlotte is several feet away, deep in conversation with the gallery's director, animated and engaged, doing what she is very good at doing in these rooms. And he is looking at the model with the specific quality of attention that Elena has learned over years of watching people engage with her work in gallery settings to distinguish from mere observation. Most people look at architectural models the way they look at many things in galleries, with the performance of interest, their attention touching the surface of the object and moving on. He is doing something else. He is looking the way people look when they are actually seeing, when the object has claimed them rather than the other way around, when they have forgotten that they are looking and are simply present with the thing they are looking at. She watches him look at her building for approximately 40 seconds. It is long enough to make a judgment about the quality of his looking. It is also long enough to make a judgment that she does not want to be making, which is that the man from the conference room looking at her unbuilt building at 7 o'clock in the evening with that specific unperforming quality of attention is a thing that does something to her that she would very much prefer it did not do. He turns. He sees her. The second meeting of their eyes is different from the first in the way that a second reading of a sentence is always different from the first. You already know the words, but knowing them changes the experience of encountering them again. In the conference room this morning, the recognition arrived in half a second and was immediately covered by the professional occasion. Here there is no immediate professional occasion to reach for. Here they are, two people at a gallery opening who have met briefly once before and who are now looking at each other in the warm, crowded light of an evening that has no agenda beyond the evening itself. And the distance between them is 12 feet, and the look lasts approximately 4 seconds, and then he crosses the gallery floor. He stands beside her at the model. Everything slows here, all the way down, because the conversation that follows is worth inhabiting with full attention. What is said, what sits beneath what is said, and the precise texture of the space between the two. He tells her he had specifically asked about this project when he arrived, the model, which drew him immediately from across the room, not knowing she would be here. She tells him she designed it 3 years ago, a community center for a neighborhood in the South Bronx that had been trying to get a culturally appropriate gathering and performance space funded for over a decade. He asks why it was never built. There is no condescension in the question, no assumption, only genuine wanting to know. She tells him about the grant that was rescinded, the city funding that got redirected to a different priority, the private donors who pledged and then quietly didn't, the particular bureaucratic and financial erosion that kills projects like this one not in a single decisive moment, but in a series of small retreats. He listens to all of this. He does not offer solutions or alternatives or the optimism of someone who has not been inside this particular disappointment. He just listens, and then he is quiet for a moment in the specific way that is not silence in the absence of words, but silence as a response. The silence that says, "I heard that, and I understood what it cost." She asks him what brought him to the exhibition. He says a colleague sent him the program and the description caught something in him, the idea of buildings at the edge of the possible. And he says this with a self-awareness that suggests he knows it sounds like an unusual reason for a lawyer to attend an architectural exhibition on a Tuesday evening and that he is willing to have it be unusual. She says she thinks the most important buildings are always at the edge of the possible, that the ones built entirely inside the possible are comfortable and competent and forgettable. He asks if she believes that buildings that are never built are less real than buildings that are. She considers this for a genuine moment, not performing consideration, but actually thinking, and she says she believes a building that exists only as a drawing and a model is fully real as architecture, but tragically unreal as a building, and that this difference is where most of the grief in her profession lies. He says he thinks the law works in a similar place, in the gap between what a thing is in language and what it becomes in the world. This observation lands between them. It is the first thing either of them has said that moves past the professional and into something more honest, something closer to the interior truth of each of them, and both of them feel it arrive. She does not respond to it directly. She asks him something about the development project, a neutral redirect, professional terrain, and he answers and then lets the conversation rest. They stand for a moment in the comfortable silence of people who have just said something true and are giving it room. Charlotte arrives at Daniel's side. She is warm and easy. This is her natural register in social settings, and it is not performed. It is genuinely who she is, a person of natural social fluency who moves through rooms like someone who has never been unwelcome anywhere. She is introduced to Elena, and she greets her with the enthusiasm of someone who has actually seen the work and found it impressive. And Elena receives this with the warmth it deserves and feels something else underneath the warmth that she does not have a clean name for. It is not jealousy, because jealousy requires a prior claim, and she has no claim. It is not resentment of Charlotte, who is genuinely warm and entirely without culpability. It is something more precise than either of those. It is the sensation of understanding exactly what configuration of the world one occupies, understanding it clearly and completely for the first time, and finding that the configuration, though entirely reasonable and appropriate and the right one for everyone involved, forecloses something that was beginning to feel like it might matter. She excuses herself graciously a few minutes later. She says it was lovely to see him again, tells Charlotte she hopes she enjoys the rest of the exhibition, and moves away across the gallery floor, back toward Marcus and the event and the professional obligations that give her a place to put her attention. She does not look back. This is a conscious decision. Elena is a woman for whom most decisions, including where to put her eyes, are conscious. Section 7. The Rain. The awning. The rain arrives the way it has been threatening to arrive all day, not with drama, not with the declarative thunder that September sometimes provides, but in the quiet, decided way of a thing that was always coming and simply waited for the right moment to begin. It is 9:15 when Elena collects her bag, says her goodbyes, and steps through the gallery's glass door onto West 23rd Street, and the rain is already on the pavement, light, steady, angled slightly west by the beginnings of an October edge in the air, cold enough to matter and patient enough to soak. She steps under the gallery's awning. It is narrow. The awnings of Chelsea galleries are not designed for shelter so much as suggestion, the architectural equivalent of a raised eyebrow in the direction of the weather. And she stands close to the building's facade and looks at the rain and looks at her phone and calculates. The 23rd Street station is 4 blocks south and 1 block east. Not far. She has walked further and worse. She is in the burgundy dress and low-heeled boots, and she has no umbrella because she checked the forecast this morning and the morning forecast said 30% chance of late evening showers. And 30% is not a number that typically prompts Elena Vasquez to carry an umbrella. She is reconsidering this methodology. She is looking at the rain and calculating whether to walk or to call a car when she hears footsteps on the gallery steps behind her, and she does not turn immediately because footsteps behind her on the gallery steps are not her business. And then he is beside her under the awning, and she does not need to turn to know it is him because the city is not subtle tonight, and she has known since she left the gallery that this was a possibility, and she is prepared for it by deciding that it is. Simply a person and not a circumstance. He is also without an umbrella. He stands looking at the rain with the same apparently unhurried attention he has brought to everything today, and he says Charlotte left an hour ago a board dinner she had forgotten to enter in her calendar, and that he stayed for the rest of the exhibition, and that it was worth staying for. He says this simply, without loading it, without the knowing quality that would make it mean more than it says. It means exactly what it says. He stayed because the exhibition was worth staying for. Elena believes this without analysis, which is itself a significant data point, because Elena analyzes almost everything. The awning is narrow enough that standing under it requires them to be closer than strangers normally stand. Not touching, there is still clear air between them, but in the proximity of people who are in the same small shelter together, which is its own category of closeness, distinct from the closeness of a room or the closeness of conversation. The rain comes in slightly at the north edge, and he shifts a half step south to stay under the dry margin, and this shift brings him perhaps 6 inches closer to her than he was. And neither of them addresses this, because it is weather and proximity, and there is nothing to address. Stay here for a moment, on this narrow strip of dry pavement under a gallery awning in the September rain. The city sometimes creates situations like this without announcement, engineering them out of weather and geometry and timing, then simply letting them exist without managing the outcome. It has put 2 people under a narrow awning in the rain. What they do with that is entirely up to them. What Elena notices, standing in the rain's edge under the gallery's awning, the quality of his stillness. She has met men who are still in the aggressive way, the stillness of performance, of dominance, of the person who has decided that waiting is a form of power. This is not that stillness. This is the stillness of a person who is genuinely present in the moment he is in, not in the 3 moments ahead of it or the calculation of what this moment can produce, but simply here, watching the rain fall on West 23rd Street with a quality of actual attention. She notices that he smells like cedar and cold air and something beneath both of those things, something she does not have a name for and does not try to name, because naming it would be an acknowledgement that she is noticing it, and she is not ready to acknowledge that. She notices the way his coat fits, a dark overcoat, well cut, the kind of coat that fits the way things fit when they've been made for a particular person or chosen with the patience of someone who knows exactly what they want. She notices his hands, the way they are still at his sides, the way he is not reaching for his phone, not creating occupations for himself the way people do when they are uncomfortable with where they are. He is not uncomfortable with where he is. This is, Elena thinks privately, an unusual quality in a person. What Daniel notices, standing beside her under the awning while the rain finds its rhythm on the pavement, the way she holds her stillness differently from him, more tightly, he thinks, with more effort in it. The stillness of someone who has practiced it and made it real, but for whom it does not come from the same place as his does. He notices her profile in the street's available light, the particular quality of a face that is not arranging itself for anyone, that is simply existing in the weather and the evening and its own thoughts. He notices the way the burgundy of her dress, visible at the hem of her coat where she has left it unbuttoned in the warmth of the gallery and not yet fastened against the cold, catches the sodium light from the street lamp across 23rd. He notices that he is aware of all these details with a precision foreign to his normal relation with the world. He is not a noticer in this particular way, not of these kinds of details, not of the visual texture of another person's presence at a level this granular. He finds this awareness interesting in the way a person with a very good mind finds anomalies interesting, with curiosity rather than alarm, though alarm might actually be the more appropriate response. They stand in the rain shelter for several minutes. The rain does not stop. A taxi goes by, its light dark off-duty. A couple shares an umbrella on the far side of the street, walking quickly west. The gallery's light spills out onto the pavement through the glass doors behind them, and the sound of the party inside, the conversation, the ambient music, the particular acoustic texture of people and wine and art in a room together, is muffled and warm and completely elsewhere. One of them, or maybe both of them at once, as though the rain has gently shifted, looks south toward the street and the waiting city and the 23 blocks of subway ride between this awning and where they each need to go. And then they begin to walk. Decide to walk together. This is important. There is no moment in which either of them proposes it and the other accepts. What happens is that they are both under the awning and both heading south, and the rain has gentled fractionally, from persistent to merely present, and one of them takes a step, and then so does the other, and they are walking. The city has managed this with characteristic efficiency. The decision is made before either of them has had time to evaluate whether to make it. For blocks, West 23rd to West 19th, and then east to the station entrance at the corner of 7th. These 4 blocks matter. A brief walk through Chelsea at 9:30 on a Tuesday in September with someone whose presence has introduced a new variable into the equations of your day deserves its full weight, every step of it. The sidewalk is the wet, dark mirror that New York sidewalks become in the rain. The streetlights doubled in the reflective pavement, the shop lights smeared in warm horizontal bands across the wet concrete. The city's geometry multiplied and softened simultaneously. They walk south on the Galleries block, past a restaurant where the last reservations of the evening are still sitting over dessert and the windows are fogged with warmth, past a parking garage where a lone attendant reads something on his phone in the booth without looking up, past a block-long stretch of construction hoarding where a building that was something else last year is becoming something new, the city's constant regeneration, visible always in scaffolding and hoarding and the particular dust that construction leaves on the surrounding pavement. Elena notices the hoarding's cornice detail. Someone has installed decorative tin molding along the top, an aesthetic courtesy extended to a temporary barrier that most people pass without seeing. She registers this, the impulse to make something temporary also something considered, and files it in the architectural catalog she keeps running at all times, the continuous notation of the city's thoughtful moments. He is beside her. Their pace has found itself without negotiation, the same unhurried, purposeful stride, not the rush of people trying to escape the rain, but the pace of people for whom the walk has become, without either of them formally acknowledging this, a thing in itself rather than merely transit. The rain is on their shoulders, light enough not to require alarm, persistent enough to make the world feel slightly enclosed, the sky low and orange-gray and close the way urban night skies in the rain can feel almost intimate. The clouds lit from below by the city's own extravagant light. He asks what drew her to architecture. This is not the version of the question that is small talk. It is not looking for the short, polished answer, the narrative for new acquaintances answer. It is asked with the quality of someone who actually wants to know, and that quality is recognizable because it is uncommon enough to stand out. Elena feels the difference between the versions of this question and responds accordingly, not with the short answer, but with the true one. She tells him about a church in Jackson Heights, where she grew up. Not a famous church, not a beautiful church by any global standard of architectural beauty, a modest mid-century Catholic church on a side street between the elevated subway line and a commercial block full of Indian and South American restaurants, the kind of building that belongs entirely and irreplaceably to the neighborhood it is in and would make no sense anywhere else. She tells him that when she was 9 years old, she went to early Saturday Mass with her grandmother, as she did every Saturday through most of her childhood. And on a particular winter morning the light came through the rose window at the east end of the nave at an angle she had never seen before, a January angle, the sun low and precise. And it fell across the worn tile floor of the center aisle and turned it into something that she did not have a word for at 9 years old and has never quite found a word for since. Something sacred is the closest she can come, but she means sacred in a sense that has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with the fact that an ordinary worn tile floor in an ordinary modest church in Jackson Heights was, in that light, at that angle, completely and undeniably extraordinary. And she understood, at 9 years old, that the person who put those windows at those angles in that nave had put the light there, had planned for it, had known, years before anyone stood in that light, that it would arrive exactly this way, and had arranged everything around the fact of its eventual arrival. She has been trying to do that in various ways ever since. He is quiet for half a block after she finishes this. It is not the silence of someone computing a response, not the silence of someone who has stopped listening. It is the silence of a person sitting with something that has landed fully. She asks him what drew him to law. He takes slightly longer to answer, and that slight lengthening is the sound of him choosing the true answer over the prepared one. The prepared answer lives very close to his tongue. He has given it many times in various rooms with the easy fluency of a story well practiced. The true answer requires more finding. He says, carefully, as though speaking a thing rather than reciting it, that he was drawn to the precision of it. To the idea that language, if handled with enough care and patience, could be made precise enough to remove ambiguity from human agreement. That you could take two people who wanted different things and build, in language, a structure that held both of their wants in some workable relation. He says he found this idea beautiful when he was 22 years old in his first contracts course at Yale Law, the idea that language could be made into architecture. She turns to look at him when he says this. He does not look back at her, he is looking at the street ahead, but he feels her looking, her registering the word architecture in his mouth, him knowing that she registered it, and the small charged resonance of the coincidence, if coincidence is what it is. She says she thinks that might be the opposite of what she does. That architecture, unlike contracts, is never precise enough to remove ambiguity. It is always open to interpretation, always multiple and resistant to the single reading. The same building in different light is a different building. The same building experienced by different people is different buildings. The same building in 10 years is a different building from what it is today. The ambiguity is not a failure of the architecture, it is its nature. He thinks about this. They have turned east now on a 20th Street. The buildings on this block are lower and more residential, the street quieter, the rain making a different sound here where there are trees, and the drops have leaves to land on before they reach the pavement. He says that he is starting to think the opposite of a thing is usually the thing you were looking for all along, without knowing you were looking for it. He says this without drama, without the actor's awareness of a good line. He says it with the quality of a person thinking aloud. The sentence hangs in the silence that follows it on a wet block in Chelsea at 9:45 on a September evening. For seconds. 5. The rain continues. The streetlight ahead turns from red to green and back, and has no relevance to people who are not in cars. A window above them goes dark in one of the residential buildings, someone going to bed in the ordinary way of a Tuesday night, unaware of the conversation unfolding 20 feet below. They reach the 23rd Street station entrance. The staircase descends to the left, the warm breath smell of the subway rising to meet the cold street air in the particular combination that is one of the most instantly recognizable sensory signatures of this city. Something that people who have lived here for years recognize the way they recognize old music, in the body before the mind has processed it. They stop at the top of the stairs. The rain has almost stopped. The pavement is still wet and reflecting, and the streetlight above the station entrance puts them both in a pool of yellow light that is the most honest, least flattering light available, and neither of them moves toward the stairs or away from them. He says it was good to see her again. He says this in a voice that reveals nothing except that he means it, which reveals everything. She says likewise, in a voice perfectly calibrated, warm enough to be genuine, contained enough to be safe, and this calibration costs her something. She turns and goes down the stairs before whatever is in her face can surface into the region where faces are readable, and he watches her go. Then he does not turn away immediately, which he does not notice, but the city does. After a moment, he turns north and begins the long walk home, already knowing he will not take the most direct route. Section 9. The Parting and the Night. 2 rooms, 1 disturbance. Elena goes down into the station and onto the 1 train heading uptown, then switches to the A train at 14th Street because she is going to West 4th, and it is the fastest route even at this hour. She does what she always does on the subway. She reaches into her bag for her book or her notebook and does not take either of them out. She holds her bag with both hands in her lap. She looks at the seat across from her, occupied by a man who appears to be a chef still in his kitchen whites, bone-tired and leaning against the window with his eyes closed, by a teenage girl with earbuds in, watching something on her phone with the complete absorption of someone for whom the train does not exist, and by an elderly man in a cardigan, reading a folded newspaper with the patient intensity of someone who has been reading newspapers for 60 years and has no intention of changing. The medium. She looks at them with the wide, unfocused attention of someone whose mind is elsewhere. Her mind is elsewhere, and she does not argue with it. She is a woman who has constructed a careful and deliberate relationship with her own interiority. She is not a person given to self-deception in any sustained way. She values clarity too much, has paid too high a price for the comfortable fictions of her marriage, to want to return to the murk of unexamined feeling. So she examines it now on the subway, with the honest and slightly unhappy precision she brings to things she would rather not be examining. She examines what the day has been. The conference room this morning, the first look, the particular quality of it, the way she buried it. The gallery this evening, the model, the conversation, the specific texture of talking to someone who listens the way he listens. The awning, the walk, the stairs. What she finds in the examination is this: she is off-center in a way she does not like and cannot entirely account for by any ordinary explanation. It is not mere attraction. She has felt attraction before, at varying intensities, and she knows what that is. What she is feeling is not only that, it is using attraction as a vehicle for something larger, more complicated, and less easily managed. What she is feeling is the specific and terrifying sensation of having met, in a single day, someone who exists at a frequency she recognizes, someone who reads things the way she reads things, who attends to the world in a register close enough to her own that conversation with him feels like being understood rather than just heard. She knows, and does not soften it for herself, that this is the most dangerous kind of feeling. Not desire, which is manageable. Recognition, which is not. She arrives at Charles Street. She takes the stairs up. She unlocks the apartment. She does not turn on all the lights, just the small lamp on the drafting table, which casts the room in the warm, partial light she prefers in the evenings, the light that makes the apartment feel inhabited rather than merely occupied. She takes off her coat, hangs it on the hook by the door. She takes off her boots. She stands in the kitchen in the burgundy dress and her socks, and she fills a glass with water from the tap and drinks it standing at the sink, looking out the back window at the alley and the ailanthus tree and the lit windows of the building across the way. Other lives. Other rooms, other evenings. She does not make coffee. She does not open her laptop. She does not return to the harborside sketches on the drafting table. She stands at the sink until the water is gone, and then she stands a little longer, because her apartment, her carefully designed, precisely inhabited, completely hers apartment, feels fractionally different tonight. And she is trying to determine whether this is something that has changed in the apartment or something that has changed in her, and she is fairly certain it is the latter, and she is not sure she is grateful for this. She thinks about what he said on the wet street in Chelsea, about opposites and what you were looking for. She thinks about the way he stood under the awning, the particular quality of his stillness. She thinks about the conference room this morning and the way he asked those 3 questions, sharp as surgical instruments, and the specific satisfaction of answering them fully. She thinks, and this is the thought she has been least willing to reach for, the one in the back of the room, about the moment Charlotte appeared at his side, and the sensation that moved through her in that moment, the name of which she does not want to say aloud, even alone in her kitchen at 10 at night with no one listening. She is a woman who has rebuilt herself from the inside out after a marriage that made her feel invisible. She has done this with enormous care and considerable personal cost, and she has arrived, 3 years later, at a version of herself that she recognizes and trusts. She has been careful, above all, with her heart, not because she is fearful, but because she is intelligent, and because she understands that the heart, like a building, can only be renovated so many times before the original structure begins to be compromised. She has been careful. She intends to continue being careful. The fact that she is standing in her kitchen at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night thinking about a man she met this morning and spoke to for a cumulative total of perhaps 40 minutes is not, she tells herself firmly, a failure of carefulness. It is simply a Tuesday. It is simply a man. It is simply the city doing what the city does, throwing people into each other's paths, creating the illusion of significance where there is only proximity and coincidence. She almost believes this. Almost is where the story lives. Meanwhile, Daniel is walking north through Chelsea, then west through the meatpacking district, and then east again, taking the long, circuitous route home that he is not consciously choosing for any stated reason, but is not choosing by accident. The rain has stopped completely. The streets of the Lower West Village are washed and quiet, smelling of wet pavement and wet leaves and the faint food smell of restaurants closing for the night, and he walks through it with his hands in his coat pockets and the wide, receptive attention that the city's empty late-night streets invite. He passes through the meatpacking district, which is still busy with its nocturnal commerce, the clubs and bars lit and loud in the way they always are on a Tuesday, not peak busy, but busy enough, the city's night economy running in its lower registers. He moves through it without stopping. He continues east and north, crossing into the village proper, and then the blocks become quieter and more residential and the city becomes, for stretches of a block or two, almost small town in its quiet. A dog being walked by a young man who is talking on his phone, a window above a bakery still lit with someone working late, 2 women saying goodbye at a corner with the extended, recursive quality of goodbyes between close friends who have more to say and are saying it in the ritual of departure. He passes the corner of Charles Street and West 4th Street without knowing that 2 blocks north and 1 block west, behind the north-facing window of a 3rd-floor apartment, a woman in a burgundy dress is standing at a kitchen sink looking out at an ailanthus tree in an alley. The narrator knows this. The city knows this. The street corner receives him and releases him north into the quieter blocks of the lower village, and Elena's block remains unintersected, and this is fine. This is as it should be. This is Tuesday night in New York City doing exactly what it does every night. He arrives home at 10:30. Charlotte is in bed, reading a novel, the kind she favors, smart, literary, slightly sad. She has a mug of chamomile on the nightstand. She looks up when he comes in, and the look is warm and easy and familiar in the way that 4 years of evenings creates a profound familiarity with the specific warmth and ease of a particular person. And he sits on the edge of the bed, and she tells him about the board dinner, who was there, what was discussed, the museum director's new initiative, the donor who said something unexpected and slightly wonderful about the collection. He listens. He asks a question or two. He is warm. He is present. He is genuinely glad to be here, in this bedroom, in this light, with this person who has been kind to him for 4 years and whom he has not deserved, not entirely, not in the way that matters most. The distance between them is present tonight in a way it is not always present, or rather, it has always been present, and tonight he cannot not feel it. He cannot skim past it. He cannot do the usual efficient thing of moving the feeling to the periphery and returning his attention to the surface. Charlotte is talking about the board dinner, and he is hearing her and responding appropriately, but underneath the hearing and the responding is the specific quality of a conversation on a wet street in Chelsea. Architecture and law. The nature of opposites. No careful calculation. No effortful performance. Just speaking. Just being spoken to. Just the rain and the awning and the 4 blocks south and the line about opposites, still sitting in him 2 hours later like a piece of music that will not stop. Charlotte turns out her light at 11 o'clock. He lies beside her in the dark, in the familiar warmth of a shared bed and 4 years of shared nights, and stares at the ceiling. He is looking at his life from the inside tonight, and it is full and ordered and correct, and for the first time in longer than he can honestly remember, the correctness of it does not feel like enough. Section 10 Epilogue. The city remembers. Midnight in New York City. The story pulls back, up, and out of the apartments, out of the specific interiors of specific lives, into the wide aerial view the city presents when it thinks no one is watching. The skyline at midnight in late September is not the skyline of postcards, not the triumphant daytime profile of towers commanding the horizon. It is something softer and more honest, upper floors lit in the irregular pattern of late workers and insomniacs and people who have simply forgotten to turn off their lights, bridges strung with suspended illumination above the dark rivers. Neighborhoods spreading from Midtown's concentrated brightness into the lower residential glow of the outer blocks, Brooklyn beyond the East River and Jersey beyond the Hudson. The whole archipelago of the city's illuminated life is visible at once as something no single person inside it can ever see. At this hour, the city holds a constellation of lit and dark windows that will never be repeated in exactly this configuration again. Tomorrow night, a different set of windows will be lit. The city's patterns of wakefulness and sleep are never quite the same twice. Each night is its own arrangement of the ongoing human activity of being awake in the dark. Tonight, the city holds everything it always holds: grief in several apartments, joy in several others, the neutral passage of sleep in most, the active commerce of the night economy in the precincts that cater to it. It holds a million private Tuesday nights unremarkable enough that the people living them will not remember them by Thursday. It holds, on Charles Street in the West Village, a woman lying awake in the dark of her precisely designed apartment, looking at the ceiling with the particular sleeplessness that is not insomnia but awareness. And it holds, on East 74th Street, a man lying awake beside a sleeping woman, doing the same. Beginnings rarely announce themselves as beginnings. By midnight, after the whole day has unfolded, that is easier to see. Something has begun tonight. Pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Two people cannot stand under an awning in the rain talking about language and buildings and opposites without something beginning. But what has begun is not simple. It does not have a simple shape. It does not fit inside the usual containers for a story that starts with two people in a conference room and ends with two people lying awake on opposite ends of Midtown Manhattan thinking about the same wet street in Chelsea. There is a man who has been sleepwalking through a life everyone around him regards as a success, and tonight, for the first time in he could not say how long, he has been fully awake. Not because of beauty. Beauty is everywhere in his life. In the Basquiat above the fireplace and the view of the park at dawn and the faces of people he has loved. Not because of intelligence. He is surrounded by intelligent people, works among them, lives with one. But because of something else, the sensation of being seen by someone who is not seeing him in order to gain something from the seeing, who is not organizing the experience of him around what he can provide or what role he is meant to fill, who is simply looking at him the way she looks at a building, with complete, honest, agenda-free attention, reading what is actually there rather than what the context suggests should be there. And there is a woman who has been so careful, so deliberately, justifiably careful, with the interior of herself that she has made of her own heart something very safe and very ordered and very alone, and who has tonight encountered a variable she did not account for in the design. She has built a life that fits her exactly. She has been, she thought, done. And the city, which does not care about done, which has never once in its 400 years of existence respected anyone's decision that they were done, has introduced a question into the architecture of that life. A question that has no clean answer and no comfortable way to not ask. And there is a woman who has been so careful, so deliberately, justifiably careful, with the interior of herself that she has made of her own heart something very safe and very ordered and very alone. Tonight, she has encountered a variable she did not account for in the design. She has built a life that fits her exactly. She thought she was done. But the city does not care about done. It has never once respected anyone's decision that they were done. It has introduced a question into the architecture of her life, a question with no clean answer and no comfortable way to not ask. None of this is nothing. Charlotte is not nothing. The life Daniel has built is not nothing. The life Elena has made for herself is not nothing. It is exactly the opposite of nothing, something she has earned at considerable personal cost, and its value does not diminish because of what tonight has revealed about its limits. And yet, that is the most honest word available. Something has been set in motion tonight with the specific, irreversible quality of a structural change, the kind that, in a building, you cannot unnotice once you have seen it, the kind that reorganizes your understanding of everything built around it. You cannot unsee a thing that's true. You can choose not to act on it. You can choose, with great effort and genuine cost, to set it aside and return to the life you had before the Tuesday and live that life fully and without complaint. People do this. The city has seen people do this many times, and it holds those choices with the same respectful indifference with which it holds all choices. But you cannot unsee it. This is what the city knows at midnight, looking down at its million-lit and dark windows, that somewhere in the particular constellation of this Tuesday night, two people who were living correctly are now living with a question they did not have this morning. And questions of this quality, the kind that arrive in conference rooms and gallery conversations and 4 blocks of wet Chelsea sidewalk, do not dissolve on their own. They persist. They find their way into the margins of mornings and the interruptions of otherwise occupied afternoons. They sit in the silences of familiar evenings and make those silences a slightly different shape. They are patient. They are, like the city itself, willing to wait. The skyline holds its midnight configuration. The rivers move below the bridges in the dark. On Charles Street, a light is still on in the north-facing window of a third-floor apartment, just the drafting table lamp, its warm pool falling across a sketch of a building that doesn't exist yet, that may or may not exist someday, that Elena Vasquez has returned to in the small hours because it is the thing she trusts most, and the trust is what she needs tonight. She is not drawing. She is sitting at the table with her hands around a mug of Cuban coffee that has gone cool, looking at the sketch, letting the building think for her. On 74th Street, a light is on in the kitchen of a high-floor apartment. Daniel, standing at the window in the dark, one lamp on behind him, looking at Central Park at midnight the way he looks at it in the mornings, with the ambient, receptive attention of someone who is present in the moment he is in and not comfortable with it and not running from it and not sure what to do next. The city breathes. The 2 windows hold their light. The bridges hold their suspended illumination above the dark and moving water. The whole extraordinary and indifferent apparatus of 8.5 million lives in a vertical arrangement on a narrow island continues its operation, sleeping, working, grieving, loving, refusing, beginning. The city does not organize any of this toward a particular outcome. It is not sentimental. It is not a matchmaker. It is a witness, ancient and patient and full of memory, the memory of every Thursday that followed an impossible Tuesday, Every first conversation that became a last one. Every door that opened quietly in the middle of a life that had believed itself complete. It is also, without sentimentality, as a simple statement of the city's long record, a place where the most important things have always arrived without warning in ordinary rooms, wearing the unremarkable clothing of a Tuesday in September. The lights hold for a long time. Longer than is strictly necessary for anyone trying to sleep. Longer than the city requires of its insomniacs. Long enough to notice them, two separate windows, two separate lives, the same disturbance, and then let the episode close, not with resolution, which would be dishonest, but with the truth of where these two people are, awake, aware, and changed in a way neither of them can yet measure, in a city that has been waiting for them both with the infinite, unremarkable patience of stone. End of episode 1. The Space Between Strangers. Director's Cut. Forbidden Love, New York, episode 2 to follow.